Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co host and dear friend, Jacob Acquire. And today, some rumblings came down the pipeline. Obviously, the title of this episode is Crown Him, and we'll be doing a huge overview of the Hall of Fame game, the risers and fallers. But a big riser today was Kyler Murray. A big faller was JJ McCarthy as Kevin O'Connell put to bed the quarterback battle. Uh, Pretty much what we thought, I would say, a couple months ago when Kyler Murray signed with the Vikings, but they name him the starter week one. He will be the dude. What do you think of this for the Vikings? I know we're a Panthers themed podcast. We do play this team week 14. I are we playing Kyler in week 14? At that point, will JJ McCarthy be the starter? Like what is the trickle down effect? Because there are some other writers around the NFL that are suggesting that JJ McCarthy is traded before week one, but I don't see that necessarily being the reality here.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he gets traded before week one. He was still the 10th pick or the 11th pick. I don't remember which pick it was. I think he was picked 10. So he was still a top 10 pick. I'm sure the team still wants him to work out, but I mean, this was obvious, right? From the moment they signed Kyler, I think most people imagine him being the starter. I don't know if it works out because Kyler did get benched last year. He was injured, but he was ultimately benched once he was healthy to play for Jacoby Brissett. So who knows who the Panthers are going to play in you said week 13, I believe. But it's interesting to have a quarterback battle, I guess, this late. I feel like most teams like they know who their starters are going to be even before training camp, but it was interesting to see that Kyler won today. I don't know if that boosts my thoughts about any of their receivers for fantasy or anything like that. Kyler isn't always the friendliest quarterback in terms of a fantasy football perspective to the receivers. He's a viable option when he's healthy, right? Because he can run around and gain some rushing yards, but I don't know how that's going to impact that. What I will say is this team won 9 games last year with McCarthy, with Carson Wentz for a little bit, and then Max Brosmer for I think a quarter of the season. They were able to patch together 9 wins. I have to imagine that they can get at least nine, probably more, possibly more, with Kyler Murray at the helm.
I'm very curious to see the dynamic between him and Justin Jefferson. I think Justin Jefferson is leaps and bounds a better wide receiver than Marvin Harrison, but a lot of those in breaking routes that I think you see Justin Jefferson do so well on when you look at his highlight reel or how he's played with guys like Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold. Accessing that area of the field is not a strength of Kyler Murray, and I'm not saying it's a strength of JJ McCarthy's, but just when you look at like how is his skill set supposed to mesh with this talent on this offense, I think it remains to be seen. And I'm very curious to see if Kevin O'Connell is making tweaks to his offense, if we see tweaks in Kyler Murray's game. Again, because you want to be able to feed one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in football. So I think that's the big thing that I'm kind of waiting to find out to see how it plays out with this group. But that's my biggest concern.
Well, and I think it's interesting too because McCarthy and Penix earlier have both not had their crown snatched, perhaps, but they've had to take a back seat to other quarterbacks. Or I think we both expect Tua or at least I think I expect Tua to start week one. That QB competition is probably going to go back and forth all year, but they brought in another starter for a reason, just like the Vikings did. And when you look at that quarterback class, we had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12 picks, right? Half of the first 12 picks are quarterbacks, and it's worked out so far for Drake May, right, who made the Super Bowl. I think Bo Nix, you could say it's worked out. Even though he's not a superstar, the Broncos probably should have been in the Super Bowl had he not been hurt in the AFC Championship game. I think I don't know if we agree that they would beat the Patriots in that one, but the Patriots did not put forth a great effort. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels have both had good years so far. It's just interesting that 4 out of the 6 quarterbacks, I think, the franchises will feel good about so far. And it just happens to be that the Vikings and the Falcons. I'm lucky that the Falcons are one of the franchises that it hasn't worked out so far because that's such a wasted pick in that year. But yeah, it stinks for the Vikings. But the Vikings, even with all this, still know how to win games. So it's going to be an interesting year for the 2024 QB class. We were talking about this pre-recording, but other than I guess Drake May's the only guy who doesn't have to prove anything out of this entire. You can maybe say Bo Nix because he did lead them to the 1 seed last year, and they were a pretty competent team. But it's going to be a big year for that QB class.
I think the biggest thing when you look at the class in totality, they aren't the most accurate bunch, and I think they leave plays on the field. I think that's like if you're talking about Drake May being exempt from this list, it's because he does all the little things right. And obviously, everybody's gonna make jokes about the schedule and the postseason run, but like he was the guy that was in the Super Bowl playing. As a second year quarterback. Like that's impressive. Like Jaden Daniels was there knocking on the door, but he's got a lot of injury concerns and he hasn't done anything about his like smaller frame. And then it's just the erratic play from guys like Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, and then Michael Penix. He can't stay healthy, and then he's an erratic player himself. So I think Tua starting in Atlanta makes sense with Kevin Stefanski. But going back to your point where you were kind of alluding to Atlanta being very similar to Minnesota in this stance, it goes back to the when you have two quarterbacks, you have none. And so you shell out all this money for Kirk Cousins, the veteran, and then you draft a guy in the top 10, and neither of them pan out because good players don't typically hit the free agency market. So the fact that Kirk Cousins was available shows that he was past his prime. And then Michael Penix, it was clearly an evaluation your scouting team did that you thought this guy was worth this pick, and he ended up being a bust. And so now you're kind of left just picking up the scraps, and it'll be very interesting to see how the Falcons pivot. If they have a lot of injuries at quarterback, are they a team that's on like Archie Manning watch? Because it's always the teams that you go into the season thinking are going to end up with the first overall pick. They end up somehow finding a way to win like 5-6 games, and it's like a team that you thought was close to the 500 just completely bottoming out 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, hopefully the Falcons don't reach that range. I still think that they have enough talent in the weapons department to win some games, right? We look at Miami. I think this is a comparable situation because Tua was there as well. We look at Miami, and I don't think they were ever in contention for the number one pick in the 2A. Obviously, Tua didn't play all of last year, but they had Jalen Waddle, they had Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane in recent years. The Falcons have Bijan, they have Drake London. Their O line should be a little bit healthier than it was last year. I think they're going to be fine in terms of winning games. I just don't think they're going to be 8 and 9 again and in contention for the division. And I hope not. We can talk more about that when we do our predictions episode, probably the week before the season. But it's the other interesting part about this is that Kirk Cousins was the through line between these two teams, right? He left Minnesota because they told him, "Hey, we're going to draft a rookie," and then he ends up in Atlanta where they drafted a rookie, and now he's in Las Vegas where they just drafted a rookie first overall. So interesting late career there for Kirk Cousins, but yeah, Kyler Murray, I guess, is the big riser of today. I haven't seen any other news or camp battles that take precedence over Kyler on the national scale.
Yeah, from camp battles or position battles, this was probably one of the bigger ones around the league. Again, when the Vikings signed Kyler Murray, I think most everybody thought it was his job. But this is an opportunity for McCarthy, who knows kind of Murray's track record at this time, being like somebody who's been injured and missed a lot of games. Like your opportunity could come sooner rather than later, and be prepared and keep working on your craft. This could be that adversity he needs to overcome to be at least like a Bo Nix caliber player and not be the player that everybody kind of memed about last year with the nine. But talking about risers, Mike Kaye is replacing David Newton as the ESPN reporter for the Carolina Panthers. He's been a guest on this podcast. Crazy to believe when he was with the Charlotte Observer. He is one of the better Panther reporters that I think we have. I think he goes up there with your Sheena Quicks, your Jeremy Fowler's, just no, not Jeremy Fowler, that's a national guy. It's Scott Fowler, who's
Mhm.
also with the Charlotte Observer. But those guys just completely great at what they do. I think what Mike Kaye is going to bring from the ESPN standpoint, it's going to be phenomenal. I think he's going to bring a different layer, and we won't have to deal with the BS questions that we were getting from Newton all those times in all the interviews. I think he's going to ask very insightful, thought-provoking questions that will give us more of an insight as to who this team really is as the season goes on.
I don't know. The group is kind of, and I say the group of the Carolina Panthers beat writers, they're kind of missing that guy now. And if if Mike Kaye is taking the reins from David Newton, he might have to start asking some of those questions. And I'm joking, of course, wishing Mike the best there. But we can get back into the Panthers team talk that we're going to talk about. And obviously, Carolina played the first game of the season last Thursday, the Hall of Fame game. It's the second highest Hall of Fame game, second highest scoring Hall of Fame game ever, and it's the first time where both teams scored 30 or more. And of course, the Panthers won on the very last play. Haynes King, talk about risers. He has probably the biggest out of all the preseason games so far, which is just one. He's probably the biggest riser out of every player in the league with the performance he put on. Just in the second half, he had a couple misses here and there, but I think overall played a stellar game with the third and fourth string players who I mean, those are the guys he throws to in camp, but he hasn't had a lot of reps as the main signal caller. And I think he did a good job piecing together some drives and ultimately winning the game with his legs. You and I talked about I wanted to see it with his arm because we know he can run, and he was dicing up the Cardinals defense throughout the entire game with his arm. But when push came to shove, he had a big 25, 30-yard scramble on a third down, and then he won the game on a little 4-yard QB scramble with his legs, which is cool to see. He showed off that he was an actual dual threat quarterback.
Brad Idzik in the interview post game comes up to him, and he's obviously the offensive coordinator. He's now the new play caller for the Carolina Panthers. He asks him like who called that draw, who set it up, and he's like, yeah, I didn't tell anybody in the huddle. I just snapped the ball and went for it. You like that. You like that kind of moxie in a player where it's like you know what you have, you know what you need to get, and he did exactly that on the very last play. And I mean, keeping his knee off the turf while leaning off the goal line is not an easy feat. So
I,
props
I
to
was
him.
getting I was getting some flashbacks to some Cam stuff there, keeping his knee off the turf.
Yeah, that
Especially the Auburn where he jumped like 10 yards into the end zone. That's what it reminded me of a little bit.
that's what it reminded you of. Yeah, when Newton evaded the Saints player, rolls left and is able to dive 5 yards and the ball outstretched the score. No, yeah, a lot of memorable just rushing moments. And Haynes King has that dual threat ability. I know we just talked about Mike Kaye, but with the Processing Blue podcast he's been on with Alex Zetlow, this was something they talked about like post draft. He was an undrafted free agent that we picked up, and everybody was like, "Is this a guy that can play like a Taysom Hill role for us? It can he eventually make the 53?" And I think people are talking themselves into him making the 53 man roster, and that's definitely there. I think when we get more into like the preseason and we see him another game and see if he can replicate what he just did instead of it being just a flash in the pan would be really nice to see, because I think he offers a different gear for this offense to turn to if Bryce Young misses a game or two, which has happened over the past couple of years. Andy Dalton has had to step in. But if he's able to show that kind of playmaking ability, especially with some of the throws he was making, it felt like with ease. I would much rather have him in the game and have the ability to push for a win than have a guy like Kenny Pickett who's super conservative, isn't going to necessarily give you a lot of juice. But I think we need to see more before making a statement like that, before he moves up the depth chart. But when you talk about risers, there was no bigger riser than Haynes King on Thursday night.
For sure. We have to remember too that King did play the third and the fourth stringers for Arizona, and Kenny Pickett did play against the backups, the primary backups, and he played against Andrew Billings, who started this game for Arizona. Billings is a 10-year veteran at the nose tackle position, and he looked like it. He was giving work to Sam Hecht, and I can't recall who the left guard was at the time, but he was collapsing the pocket like a 10-year vet should against rookie players. So I think he made his presence felt. He can be the riser for the Cardinals if we want to talk about that. He's definitely making the squad now, but he,
He was making the squad regardless.
yeah,
But yeah, no, that
yeah,
was
he was causing some damage. But once, after 2 or 3 drives, once they got him out of there, I think the offensive line bounced back. Chandler Zavala, someone who has had ups and downs in his time in Carolina. Not necessarily a great player when he starts, but has been a reliable backup, at least from a health perspective. I thought he had a pretty good game at the right guard spot, especially once Billings was out of there. He helped solidify the run game once AJ Dillon came in. Who are some of the other risers on offense for you? I know we wanted to talk about receivers, but let's hit the running backs first because it was a clear difference when certain running backs were on the field compared to when other running backs were.
I I loved the signing of AJ Dillon. That was something that I don't feel like we have with Chuba Hubbard or even Jonathan Brooks. Is
We
just the
haven't had that since
bruiser.
Deontay Foreman.
Yeah, I'd agree with that statement about Foreman. It's just having that guy in a short yardage situation where it's like you need 2 yards, he's going to get you 2 yards, and that's exactly what I think AJ Dillon brings against backups. He looked really good, especially out in the open field, and so you just hope that he's able to continue to progress in this offense where we can trust him on those 4th and 1 situations, those goal line situations, to just put his nose down and really get after it and churn out a couple yards. So I like that. Seeing him, Miles Davis, I don't think he's going to make the 53-man roster, but maybe he's able to push Trevor or ETN, HN. I don't think we're going to be politically correct here. It's spelled ETN, but Trevor ETN for that kind of running back 4 spot. It's like if Miles Davis is showing a little bit of juice and you feel like you can have explosive playmaking ability and like the run in the pass game, like why not give him the opportunity? Like at this point, like Trevor's got to step up and show that he's worthy of a roster spot. Nothing's guaranteed. So I really like Miles Davis. I think AJ Dillon definitely solidified the running back 3 position. And then if we're talking about running backs in general from like a faller standpoint, I was not a fan of Anthony Tyus. He along with Trevor Etienne were one of those. It was play after play where it was like give me something, and I never felt like I got something.
Yeah, Miles Davis, he had the trumpet going. He has the same name as the famous trumpeter, Miles Davis, so that's pretty cool to note. But yeah, it was obvious, like night and day when AJ Dillon was on the field versus ETN. They scored their first touchdown with AJ Dillon on the field. He had like 20 straight yards of running, just him. Miles Davis had the late like 35, 36, 37 yard run there at the end of the game to spring the go-ahead touchdown before or go ahead field goal, excuse me, before Arizona came back. And then Haynes King went down the field after that. It's interesting, right? Because one of the things about ETN HN being the third running back is he was supposed to bring value on the special teams as well. And we saw last year he wasn't super reliable as a punt returner, and even as a kick returner, they would lean on Chuba or Rico Dowd, whoever didn't start that game. One of those guys would be the primary returner, and then Xavier Leggett eventually would step back there as well. I thought he actually excelled as a returner during the regular season last year. But then we look at this game, ETN doesn't do a ton in terms of kick returns. And then on the lone punt that I think he returned, it was gonna land at about the 10 or 11 yard line, but he let it bounce and roll all the way down to it was the 3, but there was a false start, so they moved it back to the 1. But he let the Cardinals down the ball real close to the goal line, and Kenny Pickett got bailed out by a pass interference call later in that drive. But otherwise, we're at the 1 yard or the half-yard line. Like even I get that you want to let it roll into the end zone, but I think it was a little far out to where no one was going to tackle him either. He had a fair, safe or like a safe, fair catch spot. He could have just downed it at the 10 and got going. Maybe the special teams coordinators tell him to let it bounce, but I don't know. He just hasn't really impressed me a ton on special teams, and we can shift into wide receivers now because every receiver that put their hands on the ball on a kick return impressed me. Mechie had like a 40-yard return. Jimmy Horn had a really big return to set up the late game drive, and Jasim Reed had another, who we talked about last week as a potential sneaky wide receiver candidate on our roster. All of those guys had good kick returns, and Jasim Reed in the punt game down to punt on their 1 yard line. So I don't know. ETN isn't bringing the special teams value. He
No,
hasn't
no kick
super.
returns from ETN this past game. It was Mechie, Tyus, Reed, and Horn, all of
Mhm.
whom who had at least 25 yards gained on it. Tyus had 27, but Mechie had that 36-yarder that you're talking about. Yeah, and like he didn't touch the ball. It's like when he did touch the ball, it wasn't anything special. And then it was like when you had opportunities, you didn't touch it. It's like, where does your role?
And I think that being like a scat back, like a receiving back, that potentially could have been the role. But if Jonathan Brooks is healthy, he's just way better in that department, right? So, and the thing is, when it comes to that RB3 spot, I don't think they're going to carry 4 running backs. AJ Dillon at least brings the difference of being a short yardage converter, pounder kind of guy that Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks aren't. And so it's kind of hard to see ETN continuing to to stick around. I think he will make the team just because he was a fourth round pick last year, and it's kind of early to punt on a pick that high. But he doesn't necessarily bring the value that other players have shown so far. So in this upcoming game, that's something I'd like to see is him having a positive special teams performance if he's out there returning kicks.
I know you want to see a top 150 pick make the roster, but at the same time, he was just outside the top 100. I'm not going to lose sleep if he doesn't make the 53 because again, it should be the best 53 players, and
Sure.
at this point we haven't seen anything. Like that's like at this point this isn't like it's your rookie year, you're still learning. We're committed to you. Like no. Like you went out, you signed AJ Dillon, who's clearly giving you an edge in a department you need. Like you said, Jonathan Brooks is a better pass catcher. Like if anything, you'll be on the practice squad. If somebody gets hurt, we'll consider you on like an elevation kind of standpoint. But overall, this was a game people jokingly compared to the Chiefs Rams Monday Night Football game back in 2018, where both teams scored 50 points. What's funny is there was only a combined 3 points scored in the first and third quarters. Everything else was in the
Yeah,
second
there was
and
0 in the
final quarters.
first.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a zero
it
zero
didn't
game
start
going
till
into
the
the second.
second, quarter, yeah, and then it finally started kicking off, and it felt like obviously the stakes are, much different for fans, but it felt like it was back and forth there in the fourth quarter, and a big reason were, like, the receivers. I thought all the guys that we've talked about so far, Mechie, I thought, probably had the best game out of all the receivers. Very reliable, even when some of the passes weren't necessarily on target. I thought he was able to like clasp and get to the ground when they needed to. Jimmy Horn, I thought, turned it up late in the fourth quarter. Haynes King did miss him on like a real easy touchdown. He just lofted it over him, but
The
Horn made
play
a
before he throws at the John Mechie and it was too much of an overthrow. He put it too much on like
mhm.
that back pylon, and then it was like that one he just put way too much on it. It was the same exact like location. It was like you just got to dial it in just a little bit.
And it could be the nerves, right? It's his first NFL Haynes King, that is his first NFL performance, and that's some of the. I know we said he had a stellar game. Those are some of the low lights, if you want to nitpick. Like he wasn't necessarily accurate on a lot of the throws, but there's a real good one to Jimmy Horn. Honey hole shot on a third down that Horn caught. He caught everything. Jasim Reed, he caught everything except one pass, which it was a really bad drop. All right, like he was wide
But he
open.
has a touchdown. He
But
has a
he
touchdown.
did have a touchdown where it was all yak, like it was a drag, and Reed created the touchdown himself. And I thought all three of those guys were reliable. Bryson Tremaine, when he was on the field, was reliable as well. David Moore was out there; he didn't really make a difference, and not a receiver, but Jatavian Sanders. He started this game. He's currently, I'm looking at the Panthers. They released their depth chart for this week. He's currently listed as the third tight end on that one as well, and he caught the first two passes both for really short yardage and didn't it was more of what we saw last year. Like he didn't fight, or he didn't gain more yards when he would fight to get more yards. He wasn't necessarily shifty in the open field, and I think we don't have to call him a faller right now, but he's going to need a big performance in this game and in the joint practices, I think, because there's a lot of tight ends on this team that bring special teams value, like Felipe Franks, who also caught a pass in this game. James Mitchell, who also caught a pass in this game, and then they had a fullback out there. I think Caden Prescorn, I think is his name. He wore number 40. I would love a fullback on this team. I've wanted a fullback since we had Alex Arma on the team. So if you can have a tight end that can line up in the backfield as your fullback, that's incredible value. And JT Sanders can't really do that. So I'd like to see more out of him this week and the other preseason weeks.
Yeah, if you want to make your claim on a roster spot, obviously he's been dealing with injuries his first 2 years in his career, but you got to step it up. And another guy from that draft class that I think is kind of like he's definitely on faller watch, but it's Trevin Wallace. I mean, he's in an open competition right now for the linebacker two spot with Claudin Cherlis, and Cherlis has stepped up admirably when we've had injuries to the starters, but he's not a guy that I want starting for my NFL team. Like that's the way it goes. And so I think when you see that, it's frustrating to see that a guy that you took again with fairly high draft capital that
That
was
was a
younger
top
that you thought
100
you could,
pick.
yeah, that you thought you could develop. I think it was a reach that like that whole year was filled with reaches and bad process, and it's shown itself. Like everything that could have gone wrong with that draft class pretty much did. And so At this point, it's like you want to see something, especially with like Dan Morgan being a linebacker and him taking another linebacker. This guy not panning out is definitely not a good look on his resume. But rookies that did stand out in this past preseason game. Zakee Wheatley, he was making
Mm.
plays in the run game, the pass game, truly showing himself as a force at safety. Obviously, everybody's going to remember the Lathan Ransom hit where I don't know if that was where he bloodied his face and where you saw the
It
blood dripping
was.
down. But that vicious hit, I'm shocked that there wasn't a personal foul called because that was leading with the head. Like as much as I love Ransom and the Panthers team, that was a egregious hit or a very violent hit, and it didn't seem like there was a fine that
It's
occurred afterwards.
preseason
So
for the refs too, you know.
I get it. It was more just like one of those things like you got to know as a player, like you got away with one, don't do that again kind of situation because like those are the kind of like I think he caught it like around what the 30-yard line. Like you do that, they're immediately inside the red zone. It's like
Mhm.
you can't add insult to injury. Like I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to make a play, make a statement hit. But yeah, that kind of is a little side tangent. Cam Jackson, he looked good. Lee Hunter, he did a great job at like two gapping, but I wouldn't say like he was anything special to write home about as like kind of a second round pick. Cam Jackson, I think, really showed his worth having two solo tackles, being an impact player in the run game. Any other notes you had from the defensive side of the ball, both negative or positive? I know there's a few guys that we still have to touch on with the fallers and kind of up and down performance.
Yeah, I thought Zakee Wheatley was phenomenal, like you said. Didn't make many mistakes. Showed off the range. That was the question I had about him in the draft process was his range. Like, could he make up space? And I thought he did a really good job of that. Fit the run game pretty well. You talked about Cam Jackson, who, as we look right now, is still named the starter alongside Derek Brown and Bobby Brown. He obviously fifth round pick from Florida 2 drafts ago. And I talked with one of my friends who went to Florida as a like Florida super fan in terms of their football and basketball. And what he, when I asked about him, because I said, "Hey, look, he's the starter now. This is pretty cool." He told me the best moments from Caleb Banks's tape were when Cam Jackson was next to him 2 years because Caleb Banks didn't play much this past year. Same thing with the big guy who went to Tampa Bay, Desmond Watson, the 450-pound nose tackle guy. He obviously massive human, but Cam Jackson helped a ton there for him. And I think that if we get a version of Cam Jackson who at the nose is able to do his job, like push the center of the guard and help out guys like Derek Brown, Bobby Brown, Turk Wharton when he's back, Lee Hunter when he's mixed in, I think that's a huge deal for this defensive front, which even with the money they've invested outside of Derek Brown doesn't have a lot of push. So I think Cam Jackson showing something is an absolutely perfect step in the right direction. On the, I guess, for the negatives, there was no pass rush in this game for like from the edge rushers. Princely Umam was out there. He had five true pass rush sets. Just nothing from him there. Travis Gibson was out there. Cam Gill, who we talked about, the UFL from or excuse me, the defensive player of the year from the UFL, he didn't really contribute out there. So hopefully we see more uh, improvement out of that group this week because again, after Jalen Phillips and Pat Jones, and even Pat Jones isn't a superstar edge rusher, right? After the Nick Scorton loss, that group is very thin. So I need to see, and Carson Beck is not a great guy under pressure. So I just need to see something out of them this week.
That is partly what frustrated me with the defensive game plan. That if you are seeing that you can't get to the quarterback and you are playing very basic coverages, be a little bit more aggressive. Send a linebacker, send a guy from the secondary, just to force a faster throw because we were not getting home all night, and it showed. Carson Beck was tearing us up and carving us up like you thought we would be a turkey on Thanksgiving. Like it was just honestly like really poor football, I think, from the back seven. Because not the back seven, but the front four, and then that kind of trickles into the back seven because they can't hold up for 4, 5, 6 seconds. Like at that point, like somebody's going to come open, especially after the quarterback's able to diagnose what he's looking at. So seeing a trade, another signing. We talked about this last week, but we have to see more from the edge room, and I don't think it's in house. We're going to have to go get somebody to just beef up that room because you need a rotation. we talk about the interior having this really nice rotation, especially if Cam Jackson's coming along, of like how you can just kind of filter through guys and keep guys fresh. You're going to need that in the edge room as well. Other defenders that kind of were up and down. This guy's probably not making the roster, but a Caleb Evans. He was a guy that allowed the big throw when the Cardinals were backed up kind of to their own end zone. Carson Beck, I think on a third down close to his 10-yard line, just throws it up, and Caleb Evans had been beat by his guy. A little bit later on in that same drive, I think Will Lee got burned by the same wide receiver. But Will Lee, prior to that, I think the drive or two before, had a nice pass breakup. So Will Lee, I think the biggest thing is he needs to learn not to always bite on the double move, to be more conscientious of like what could happen if he's playing too aggressive. And I think that's going to come with time. And you had mentioned Andrew Billings kind of giving the work to the interior. Sam Hecht had a couple bad reps in the run game against what is considered one of the stronger interior defensive linemen. He bounced back. He had a couple good pass pro reps, and you just want to see improvement there. But it does appear that Luke Fortner will probably be the starter at center while he's getting acclimated to the NFL.
And that was Sam Heck's, I guess you could say his weakness on his draft profile was his size, right? He's a little bit of a smaller guy, but with that, he's able to move well. It's just when you match up against somebody of Billings' caliber, who's a 10-year vet, against a rookie, he's gonna know how to beat you there. And he was able to sack, or he created the pressure to sack Kenny Pickett on the only sack that the Panthers gave up in this game. Will Lee, just wearing that 24, I got chills just seeing him out there. The Josh Normans, the James Bradberries, and or both of those guys early in their careers, they're prone to biting on some stuff. And it took a year or two of some seasoning before James Bradberry came along a lot quicker than Norman did. But once Norman got to his height, obviously a higher peak than Bradberry. So I think Will Lee, who's used to manning up and playing press, he's going to have to get used to some of the zone looks, some of the looks that NFL receivers can throw at him. But I'm still encouraged. I mean, the pass breakup, it reminded me of some James Bradberry stuff against Mike Evans. So hopefully we see a bit of a bounce back from him there. Corey Thornton as well. I thought he played well, other than the touchdown he gave. He had great coverage on that touchdown. It's just Beck gave a perfect moon ball to Semi Fehoko we were talking about in the corner of the end zone there. So yeah, I can't complain too much about this game. Obviously, the Panthers won. It doesn't matter that they won in terms of placement or scoring or anything, but I thought there were a lot of hopeful and positive moments in this game that we can build off of going into this week's game against Carolina North, which is going to be in Buffalo. It's pretty cool that the Panthers are going to be the first team in their new stadium. So the team that they emulate, want to be so badly, the Bills. The real thing is coming to town to test out the new. I'm not going to say and improved, because everything on social media says that stadium is not an improvement over what the old one was. We're going to be the first game in that, we'll call it iffy new stadium, where some fans can't see the field, and there's flooding, and there's no bathrooms on the high level, and the TVs are about as big as the computer monitor I'm staring at right now. So like, yeah, it should be a fun game for fans who aren't there, we'll say.
I don't want to be too condescending with this, but I was in Italy recently, and when you go and see the Coliseum, as you get to the higher sections or further away from the field, or where the arena and all the activities going on, you do have pillars that kind of supports things, and they would have these benches that would kind of go to where you in some of these sections would be blocked by a massive pillar. And all of these sections that people are talking about are in kind of the upper levels. And I, I don't want to be like, don't be broke, but it's like one of those things like, yes, it sucks. That was a awful architecture standpoint, but it's a funny homage to like, this was something that's been dealt with for thousands and thousands of years with some of these
Sure.
designs and builds. It's just, if you don't want that, if you want a better view, pay a little bit more. That's kind of how this all breaks down at the end of the day. But it will be interesting to break in the new stadium. I think their new jerseys are horrendous. The fact that
Yeah.
the color scheme is is as bad as it is, because it's like you could do so many cool things. Like their red jersey is so cool. If they had leaned into that color palette a little bit more, I think you would have gotten a lot better results. And then like removing the actual bill from the helmet decal, and then I get what you're doing with the V-shaped taper in the back where it connects. Like that's cool. Like I'm here for that. But like just the fact that you're removing so much and then not working with what works so well with their jerseys and the color scheme, it's disappointing. But that is graphic design over the past decade. Everything has gone to more like dull and just bland kind of concepts instead of actually leaning into creativity.
It looks like a Pro Bowl jersey, or it reminds me of over this past year for the Super Bowl, Fanatics, the main NFL jersey company, they ran out of jerseys for Patriots fans, so they created this like black jersey with red number. Maybe it was like really dark navy blue, and it was just a horrible jersey that the Patriots have never. It's never been worn. It's like it's not a real jersey, and that's what it reminds me of. Like it doesn't even look like a real Bills jersey. I get that the Bills are called the Nickel City, like that's their city's nickname, but like I don't know, maybe they could have done gray with red or something, or a blue jersey with gray outline instead of white or something. It didn't need to look like
Or do a
this.
nickel helmet, not a nickel jersey or like a
Yeah,
nickel
yeah,
top and you change the pants. But it can't be all like, again, there's so much of like the color designs where it's like you don't have any contrast with like top and bottoms. And I just
yeah.
don't get that anymore. Like it is one of the more mind blowing, I think, uniform designs that we've seen. And it's just like, it's cool for like color rush jerseys, but that's about it.
Well, and the thing too is there are a number of teams that have red, white, and blue across every sports league, and one of the things that differentiated them from the Giants is the Giants have silver pants that they like to wear a lot of the times. Well, now the Bills have some gray uniforms too. So the New York team, the Bills, are trying to emulate the Giants a little bit too much, I think. But if we want to get to the actual game and talk about the game, Dave Canales said that the starters are going to play between 10 to 20 snaps, depending on how things go. So if the team goes out there, puts together a good drive, like 10 play drive, and scores, I imagine we won't see them again. If it's a three and out, then yeah, we're going to see a couple series. I think it's what happened in I think it was the Texans game last year where uh, their defense was stifling our offense, obviously, because they're the best defense in the league. And so we kept the offense out there for a couple drives. But that's how I imagine this going. And if that's the case, I'm going to need to see the Bryce Young and T Mac connection that's been the talk of camp, or the connection between those two and then Jalen Coker. It seems like every day we have a practice, it's the defense has had a good day, but oh, we have a perfect pass to T Mac or perfect pass to Jalen Coker. I need to see that. Just give me a little bit of hope after six, no, 7 or 8 months without Panthers football.
Yeah, you want to see something from your starters, because the one thing I will say going to the Hall of Fame game, and again, a lot of bland coverages, no exotic
Mhm.
looks. You're not doing anything creative. But what I like to see from Idzik was he leaned into the drags and the crossing routes and these
And
like,
yeah, some of the boot, like the naked boot on fourth down to the tight end.
yeah. No, and like some of those concepts are cool because it's quick outs. You're creating these high-low concepts that's creating conflict for defenders. It's exactly what you want to see. And if that's the wrinkle he's able to add to the offense in the regular season and make it work, I want to see that. And I think that would help Bryce's game a ton too, because he does have the ability to make those vertical shots, but he a lot of times leans into like one-on-one matchups. And we've been seeing that in camp with T Mac and some of these other wide receivers, to where it's like you want to have those shots when you can take them, but working things and actually going through a progression, I think this is something that Idzik can build on. I'm just hopeful that he didn't put all his cards on the table at the Hall of Fame game, and we're just going to see kind of the same old bread and butter that we have from like kind of the Canales era. So that is what I'm looking forward to, is also seeing what are the play concepts. Do we see some of this creativity, and is there more to come with this, or is this about all Idzik has to offer?
I love that you brought that up because I think this is Idzik's first real test. Jim Leonard, the Bills defensive coordinator, said today that he expects the defensive starters, to play for a time. So we'll probably get some starter versus starter matchup at least. And I want to see. what Idzik is able to do without giving the entire game plan away, right? But at this point, that's not a huge deal because Dave Canales has been calling plays for 2 years with this team. We kind of are what we are. But yeah, sprinkle some stuff in there. We talked about the stuff that he was able to do for Haynes King. Find some interesting mismatches or something like that, or give up one real play to show us, hey, this is what we've been working on. We uh, we can do this. Let's have a Jonathan Brooks screen or something to go 15 yards. Just one thing that I don't know is creative and will be fun to look back on next week when we're reviewing the game.
Yeah. Again, it's just building on what we've seen, and if you can continue the build and layer, I'm all here for it. My fear is that you're starting to dig a little bit too deep into your bag, and we'll see how that plays out over the rest of the preseason, and then obviously leading into the regular season. I think we as an offense have a great matchup week one against the Bears. Like as much we've talked about the Panthers injuries so far in training camp, their defense is decimated right now too. So it's one of those things that it would be great to see week one as like a shootout that we just saw in the Hall of Fame game, and you're able to somehow come out on top. But again, getting ahead of ourselves, we have the Bills matchup this coming Saturday. I think is that about all we want to touch on before we jump in the
Well,
perfect takes?
it's going to be hard for the defense to send exotic looks, but if Josh Allen is out there and the starters are out there, just muddy it up a little bit for them. Like, don't give the Bills a signature easy first drive highlight in that new stadium. Like,
Well,
let's
I mean,
throw a
it's
safety blitz at him or something.
let's expect. I mean, Joe Brady is a little bit more on the conservative side. This is a team that
That's
likes running
true.
the ball. Stop the run. Put him in a third
Mm.
and long situation and make Josh Allen beat you. Like that is actually more what I want to see from this defense because the guys that we have in the trenches, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to stop the run. It's just a matter of can you generate a pass rush on those key downs, and that's why you sign a guy like Jalen Phillips. That's what you hope Cam Jackson is able to now spring Derek Brown on these one-on-one scenarios where he's able to beat his guy and get after the quarterback and push the pocket. Like those are the kind of plays you want to see on those what you talked about earlier, those true drop back sets, and then even see a guy like Prince Milan, him take a step against the second team.
Yeah, maybe get an interception or something. Get your lick back for last year. The Bills came into town and, or I don't remember if that was here or if it
I
was
think it
in
was here,
Buffalo.
and Andy Dalton was starting
Yeah,
that game,
Andy
and we
Dalton
got
played and
spanked.
yeah, they whooped us, right? That was I'll say James Cook. 'Cause that was a huge James Cook game. So get your look back a little bit while the starters are in. That's what I want to see. And if we get into our takes now, my take actually has a bit to do with that. And I think the Panthers starters are going to score. Uh, I think I wrote, no, I wrote on Saturday. Thought I wrote on Sunday. But the Bills, I think they're going to be a little conservative. Even if they have their starters out there, that defense does not inspire like just across the league. I'm not a huge fan of the Bills defense. They've brought in some guys, they've drafted some young players, but I still think it's going to be up to Jim Leonard to really get that group going. And so I'd like to see a score on Saturday. And I think that if all the starters are playing, you get a little bit of Jonathan Brooks, a little bit of Chuba. I think we have the skill players to get it done.
I like it. Last year, we did pretty okay on the first drive. I think on the 17 first opening possessions, we had 6 touchdowns, 3 field goals. So in over half your games, you're scoring on your opening possession, which is a good sign. You obviously want to see that number a little bit higher as you're leaning into kind of the offense and how much you've invested into it. But I think it's a good sign. It's a good indicator that hey, we will put the ball in a position where we're either kicking a field goal or we're putting it in the end zone, and to kind of lean into that. Obviously, we're starting to get a little bit of the Steve reverse early on in the preseason takes. I say Carson Beck is going to have 2 interceptions last week. I know Evero's conservative. I thought he would be the one calling the game. Afterwards, it comes out that Jonathan Cooley was. We weren't playing anything exotic from a coverage look standpoint, which I completely get. But you would think, and I've alluded to this over kind of the segment, is like if you don't have a pass rush, just send an extra body. Like it doesn't like the quarterback could pick out that X is coming, but it's giving some of your defenders one-on-one opportunities to get around the edge. It kind of speeds up the quarterback a little bit from a mental process standpoint. Like that's what I want to see more of. And didn't get that from Jonathan Cooley. So Carson Beck, obviously, he tears us apart. makes my take look awful that I said he was going to turn the ball over twice. A lot of people think that he's going to be a starter because he played against a very basic defense in the very first game of the preseason. My take this week, though, like I said, leaning into the touchdown take that you just had, I think Jimmy Horn gets a touchdown. He was just barely missed by Haynes King. I think he'll have a connection with either Kenny Pickett or Kyle Trask at some point in this game. His speed is just undeniable. I think he'll get behind the secondary or make a move, but he is somebody that I think is going to continue to take that step and cement himself as a guy that should not only be on the 53, but considered for the starting lineup as we're trying to find that wide receiver 3 and 11 personnel.
I like it. I don't think Jimmy Horn found pay dirt last year, so even though it's a preseason game, it'd be cool to see him get in the end zone. He might have scored in the preseason last year, but not in the regular season. And even if he doesn't start, or once I assume he'll make the 53, even if he doesn't start, I'd like to see him have more versatility as a returner as well. That's something, if you go back to his pre draft presser, he said he loves returning kicks because it gave him the ability to showcase his open field movement ability. And all of last year, it was Etienne, Achan, and Chuba and Rico Dowdle and Xavier Leggett. Just let Jimmy Horn get a couple return. We saw in this game he has the juice to return it. So let's give him a couple returns in the Bills game.
Yeah, no, I just want to see him touch the ball more because it seemed like he was a
Mhm.
lot more comfortable. Again, it was against backups, but he's a guy that it feels like he has an extra gear, and we don't have a lot of that on the offense. Like I'm excited to see Jonathan Brooks potentially for a few reps this coming Saturday because he's a guy that I think has that extra gear. And the more that you have that versatility and a guy that can be a home run hitter, I think it just adds a different gear for the offense as a whole. And then it also forces the defense to kind of play a little bit more prevent style. And I think that lends itself to like Bryce Young's skill set and being able to just kind of go through his reads and find who's open. So having more of those stretchers and home run hitters is a big thing, I think, moving forward. And he's part of that.
For sure. Let's see if he. Well, it's not really up to him. It's up to the play calls and stuff. But let's see if our offense has what it takes on Saturday. Unfortunately, we have to wait until Saturday, even though last week we played on a Thursday. But I think the preseason starts officially this Thursday, so we'll have games all throughout the weekend, which will be good to watch if you're missing football. But until the Panthers play, and until we're back next week, you can find us on our socials on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast content. And until next week, keep pounding.